Hello and welcome to C++ 101 and Introduction. This is week number 2, our Monday class, and our lead instructor is Mr. Nelson LeKay. Mrs. Hey Nelson, how's it going?
Hey Jason.
We also have our TA with us. That would be Gavin. So say hello, Gavin.
Hello, Gavin.
Gavin.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so very good, sir. Gavin will be helping with homework, helping with people that have questions over in the webinar, if there's simple things that don't warrant time for discussion. So when you ask a question over in the questions panel, make sure you keep an eye on that panel just in case an answer comes back over there. Also, wanted to bring this up real quick. I think everybody's pretty much everybody that's in here has found it, but remember, the calendar system, very, very important. Nelson, if you could bring that up real quick, that would be fantastic. The password always gets posted within 5 minutes of start time for the class. So that means from time to time it might be 2 minutes before start time. Don't worry, if you're planning on starting the class on time, you already know I give about 5 minutes for everybody to come straggling in. You'll find the password here. Just grab it and you'll be ready to go. Also, just keep an eye on the calendar itself for updates. We're going to be adding some new courses in. The C# class is coming. There's a networking class with Nelson that's being worked on. The Blender 102 class will be posted probably in another week for that one. But keep a watch on live classes every day. This is where we will be posting updates and things like that about the classes. These are firm dates. Also, for those of you that are now joining us in the webinar for the first time, and you have not made it over into BuzzNet, Nelson, if you could bring that up, that'd be fantastic. This is very important, very important. I'm not going to be super hardcore about it today, but starting next week, I will be. You must be in BuzzNet. So just head on over to buzznet.3dbuzz.com. and just log in with your regular 3D Buzz credentials. This is very important. This is a system that it logs everything per class for us. It also keeps track of participation. It keeps track of, everything. And in the future, we will end up getting the testing system integrate it with BuzzNet, and at the end of the day, it's going to make things very nice for getting certificates calculated at the end. Right now, it's a little more messy because the testing system is separate and attendance is separate from that. So just getting everybody into BuzzNet is a very helpful thing to us. Another thing about BuzzNet, we like to interact with our students. We like for you guys to get your hands on the actual IDE and code instead of just sitting and staring at your screen. There is a participate button at the top of the screen. Clicking the participate button, Nelson, will activate 3 buttons over on the left-hand side. Not ready, 1 minute, and ready. This is very important to us. For those of you that are participating when we ask for participation, make sure you click the participate button, and then you can see over on the right-hand side, we get a list of people that are actually participating, and then all of you that are at the bottom that are in gray are not participating. So that's something that's very important for us. Again, something we like to track. And then when you are following along with, oh fine, here, I'll hit participate. It's like thought I'm talking right now. So when you are following along with us, Nelson will reset all the participants. As you get your code finished that you're following along with, you can simply hit the ready button up at the top. And then your name will turn, or the little icon beside your name will turn green, indicating that you are done. This is how we can make sure that most everyone is caught up with us and we're okay with going forward. The other thing is the 1 minute button. This is something that we'll ask you guys to hit from time to time if we're not sure if people have gone AFK. So if we're not sure if you're still at the machine and it's just been sitting there not ready and it seems a lot longer than expected to maybe like to type out the word CN and we're wondering, all right, wait, what's going on? We'll ask you to hit 1 minute just so that we know that you are indeed still in front of the computer. So now you know where these buttons are at. please make it a point to get into BuzzNet every time. We've got all but 2 people in BuzzNet right now. That's in the webinar. Okay, if you step away from the keyboard, you can simply just click the participate button again and unparticipate. So just unparticipate yourself, and that is perfect. Next thing I want to talk about is questions. Please make sure, if it is a question that you would like for us to address, ask the question over in the questions panel. This is very important because the chat system in BuzzNet from time to time starts scrolling so fast with everybody just talking, you can't rely on us to be watching over there for your questions. That does not mean that you cannot ask questions over there. Feel free to ask questions. We've got some awesome students like SM Jones, Segfault. I mean, there's some really cool students over there that's in the class with you guys that are extremely knowledgeable and very helpful, meaning they're way, way beyond a 102 class, but they're here really just to help out. So feel free to ask questions over there if it's something that you want to get a little bit more information about, but you're not wanting us to take the time. So you guys have multiple options, but just keep in mind, we're here for you. So if it's a question that you want us to answer, please put it over into the panel. Let's see, I'm looking at the panel right now, looking for a serious. I don't see. Yes, and you're not going to see your name in BuzzNet with the way that it's designed right now. We're keeping, and later in the future you'll probably see names, but you won't see who's participating, who's ready, and all that. Some people are kind of shy about that stuff. Let's see, the C++ 102A. Okay, thank you very much. That I think was the Gavin adjustment thing. Digging down through questions answered. That one's answered. That one's been answered. That's been answered. All right. Sorry for off topic. It's okay, Segfault, but the networking class, it's going to be a programming perspective, Segfault. Okay, so that answers that. The only other thing that I need to mention real quick, well, there's 2, and then I promise you guys I will be quiet. First is going to be dates. Dates are very important. There is going to be one no class time during this course right here. That's why the course actually takes place over 9 weeks, and it is going to be May the 21st for our Monday class and May the 25th for our Friday class. Okay, and those are posted in the member sponsor lounge, and of course it's also reflected in the calendar. So, and it's been that way. I am going to be out of town during that time, and I'm trying to keep the times that Nelson teaches without me there to help to a minimum. So, yeah. Also, speaking of 2 classes, we do have 2 completely separate classes that are covering the exact same content, but since we don't have a script in front of us, it's different every single time, examples and everything. You are more than welcome to join us in both classes. If you're completely new and the time works out for you and you want to come in there, maybe you'll take the Monday class and then you want to come back Friday and try your hand at helping people. You're more than welcome to. Speaking of that, we'll go and talk about certificates real quick. I did mention this the other day in our first week class, but for certificates, 50% attendance is required. If I did not require any attendance, then people would want to be able to just watch the recorded videos at any given point, and that would get very messy for us. Also, I like the fact that we're teaching. I like the fact that we are actually interacting with you guys. It makes me feel great. It's been so many years since I was teaching at the Renaissance Center, and I'm happy that we're back to this state instead of just doing training videos. So I want to see students in the class. That makes me happy. So with C++, it's a very popular class. I've scheduled 2 of these, one Monday at an early time, one Friday at a later time. Again, the goal is to try to accommodate as many people as I can across the globe. You'd be surprised how many emails I got blessing me out for having a free C++ class Friday at 7 o'clock at night, when for some people it was 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And did I not want anyone to attend our webinars? Oh, and actually, I got multiple emails like that. We're trying to accommodate as many people as we possibly can, guys. So certificates, very important. You need to make sure that you are here for at least 50% of the classes. It could be a Monday class, or if you can't make Monday, you're welcome to come Friday of that week, and it still counts. If you have to come in late, or if you have to leave early, I'll still give you credit, okay? So again, we're working with you every way we possibly can. Just make an effort to get in there would be fantastic. Homework. Gavin's going to be posting details about homework and talking a little bit about homework at the end of the class today. Very important that you get your homework done. Because there are so many people in the class, don't look for responses from homework unless you've done something wrong. Or for some reason you end up not getting homework turned in, make sure you let us know. Again, we try working with people as much as we possibly can. But more on homework a little bit later. And then the final thing, there will be a final exam at the end of this 8-week class that you will be required to pass, on top of all the other things I just listed, to get your certificate. Yes, Segfault, evil question number 12. But for those of you right now that are stressing the thought of, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going to have a test, I suck at tests and I'm just terrified, we actually let you take the test multiple times. We just ask that you make it a point that you honestly learn what it is you missed and why. Okay, we make this so easy on you guys, it's ridiculous. Don't cheat yourself. Take advantage of what we're trying to do to help you. Please take advantage of it. If you do, you will learn this stuff. Okay, that's it, with the exception of saying, Nelson, we have to be out of here in just over 3.5 hours. We have to. We have a UDK 101 class that takes place after this class. Sorry, no pressure.
Well, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome, sir.
Alrighty, so I guess we're going to be talking about some code.
Yeah. Today we're going to be looking at some more basic data types. We're going to be looking at signed versus unsigned. We're going to look at the size of operator, memory concerns, how memory is made available to you via stack frames, constants, the auto keyword. Woo, C++ plus 11. I like the auto keyword. We're going to be looking at C++, arithmetic operations, type conversions, arrays, and looping. We've got a lot to do. So let's get going.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fire up a new Win32 console application. Now I'm going to make sure again to select empty project underneath the application settings, because I do not want any of the precompiled header stuff or the other settings that it's going to add to our project. Then under source files, I'm going to go ahead and add a CPP file. All right, so there is a little bit of code that I want to go ahead and just get out of the way really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and type in include IOStream using namespace standard in main curly curly return 0 send.get. Okay, as of right now, does anybody have any questions about this code? Just so that people aren't getting lost. Any questions? Because we're going to be moving on here to floats, doubles, and characters. All right, so in the last class, we went ahead and we talked about variables, and variables were a way to allow or to tell C++ to reserve some memory for us and give it a name that we can stuff values into, and we can change the values of during execution. However, every variable must have a type. C++ is a statically typed language. And what I mean by that is that the way that your variables have a type and the way that other pieces of code depend on your variables having a particular type is very important. The benefits to a statically typed language, such as C++, where we are forced to, in every situation that we encounter a variable, declare a type, there's actually quite a few benefits. We have static error checking. So it prevents us from sending a variable of one type into a variable of another type if there's no conversion. And that's a great line of defense against bugs. So that type safety is something that C++ really focused on compared to C, which was a little looser and didn't allow you to do quite as much as you can in regards to type safety. Now, obviously, there's benefits also to dynamically typed languages, but C++ is not one. So basically, by having this integer keyword here in front of this variable, we are instructing the, and I do want to point out that a variable cannot change type at all in C++. Once you declare a variable of a particular type, it is stuck that type. That's a little bit different from other languages that are still strongly typed. Like, it would surprise you, but a lot of people think that dynamically typed versus strongly typed is a different concept, but it's really not. Dynamically typed just means that your variables can change type during execution, but they still have a type. So, for example, Ruby, everything still has a type, but things can change type during execution. C++, that isn't the case. Once you have a variable of a particular type, once you have a function that accepts variables of particular types, everything is pre-computed by the compiler to ensure that you aren't sending incorrect types around to other pieces of code. Is there a variable that can hold strings and numbers? There's not a type that can hold both strings and numbers, but there is a type, there actually is a few different built-in types for handling strings, and a few built-in types for handling numbers as well. And when I say built-in type, I'm not referring to types that have a keyword in the C++ language. I guess you could say there's two classifications of built-in types in C++. We have our primitives that we'll be looking at, our ints, our floats, our doubles, and stuff like that. And then we have types that aren't primitives, but are provided to us by the C++ standards, such as strings. Okay, so basically what the C++ compiler is asking the computer to do here is to reserve, in this case, 4 bytes of memory when this function runs. It's saying, give me 4 bytes of memory and let me access it with this name. But it does a little bit more than that. By specifying there's this variable is of type int, we get some additional behavior surrounding this type that we wouldn't otherwise get. This actually gives that special reserved 4 bytes of memory some semantics that the C++ compiler will enforce during execution. And in this case, although this is 4 bytes here, a number is going to be treated as an integer, or a whole positive or negative number. Now, as we saw in the last class, floats and doubles behave a little bit differently. So just to prove to you something, I can go ahead and talk about really quickly the sizeof operator.
And make sure you get them to type this out too.
Yep. Because I'm going to be talking about, because C++ by nature is a low-level language, we are spending a little bit more time going over low-level concepts than we did in the C# course. And I really want to talk about the size and the memory that variables allocate on the stack frame, but also their special behavior that they have during execution. So in this case, we are going to be using the sizeof operator. And the sizeof operator is just an operator that when given a variable or a type, it's going to return a number. And that number is how many bytes of memory that this variable or type will take up when placed on the stack frame. So I'm going to go ahead and reset everybody's ready button and ask that they type this code out.
All right, lots of people figuring out how to use the buttons. Real quick, we do have about 4 people now that have come in a little late that are not over in BuzzNet. if you're in the webinar class, please, I'm not making it mandatory today, but as of next week it becomes mandatory. You must be in BuzzNet. It's very important. All you need to do is get up a browser and head over to buzznet.3dbuzz.com and just log in with your regular 3dbuzz credentials.
Somebody did ask an interesting question. Is an integer 4 bytes regardless of 32-bit or 64-bit machines? The answer is not necessarily. It most likely will be. But the C++ specification does not define the size of or how many bytes that a particular data type will require to be used. Instead, it provides a specified range of valid values that a particular type must be able to express. And the actual size of a particular data type is completely up to the compiler. That being said, you'll commonly see ints as 4 bytes because a 4-byte int satisfies the specification's requirement for what range of values that it can contain. That being said, there are some things that will change between 64 and 32-bit once we get into pointers. No, I did forgot a. Come on, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Did you just say it's 1 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, that's what it feels like.
Oh.
Usually not awake this time. All right, so there we go.
Okay, and remember, please, once you've got this code typed in, go ahead and click the Ready button over inside of BuzzNet. All of this information gets recorded for us. It's 2 a.m. where Shibin's in. He's hardcore, man. Hardcore.
Oh, come on.
I was going to let that slide as well.
Yeah, int and float are both reserved 4 bytes. That's pretty much the point I'm trying to talk about right here. The two components of primitive data types: A, how much memory they use, and B, what semantics they have. Does the range in byte change based on compiler, runtime, or something else? It's not going to be the runtime. It's the compiler that's going to determine how many bytes a function has to reserve in order to contain all of the data that the function needs to represent. All right, looks like most everybody's ready. Segfault, you're slow. I thought C++ was your native language.
I think he's cooking as well.
Okay, we've got one more minute. Okay, sweet.
Okay, are there any more 1 more minutes or?
Yeah, if you're okay, 1 more second.
What'd you cook me, Segfault? Yeah, the sizeof operator is going to take whatever variable or type that we provide inside these parens, and it's going to return a number indicating how many bytes will this compiler reserve given a particular type. Yes, Mr. Complicated. That's exactly the point that I'm trying to drive home right here. Yeah, it is considered an operator in most languages. It looks like a function, but it's considered to be an operator. It's a part of the C++ specification. You do not need to include any header in order to get access to this functionality.
Okay, so
Slightly off.
well, I was going to say, because of time, we need to go ahead and move forward. And then Nelson, if you want to go ahead and start back up.
All right, so if I go ahead and hit F5, what we'll see will surprise a few people. You'll notice size of a number on my compiler and most compilers. Size of a number is 4, size of a float is 4, and size of a double is 8. Now here's the point I really want to make about how memory works in programming languages in general, but it's going to be very important in a language like C++, where we do have to keep these things in mind. Now, during runtime, there is no concept of types, at least as far as the machine, the CPU, is concerned. There's only data. So when I say on line 6 that I want to reserve 4 bytes to hold data, a number, that's all the computer really knows. It knows we want 4 bytes. Same with line 7. All the computer really knows is we want 4 more bytes. But what's happening here is during compile time, the compiler will attribute different behaviors to each one of these types. So unlike, and I don't mean behavior in the sense of object-oriented programming, because unlike Java or C# or Ruby or JavaScript or blah, 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 primitive types in C++ are not objects. They are simply primitives, simply reserved memory that contain nothing more than a specified behavior when given certain, or are put in certain scenarios. So when a float can contain a floating point number, that's not so much cared about as much by the computer as it is the C++ language. And again, these both are the same amount of data reserved, whereas of course the double is basically a floating point number with double precision. As you saw, it contains 8 bytes. Okay. System cannot find the file specified. What operating system are you on, or are you on, Bomberman? And are you using Visual C++ 2010? Huh. He said he has...
Does it say which file?
Oh, yeah, you're going to be getting, you will get a system cannot find the file specified if you have a syntax error. So go ahead and hit Control-Shift-B, and what you'll get is the output window. Ignore the output window. Go to View, Other Windows, Error List, and go ahead and just dock this down on the bottom of your screen, and you should have an error here somewhere. Because what's happening is the compiler's not able to compile your program, and then when it's not able to compile your program, you don't get an executable, then it tries to start the executable that doesn't exist, and you get that error. Are you...
And if that wasn't it, we can always jump over to his screen.
Yeah. I'm just waiting on a response from him, but I don't see any.
All right, we can go ahead and move forward, but let us know, Bomberman, if you got it working or not. All right, go ahead, Nelson.
Okay, so... Yeah, so here are ints, floats, and doubles. And the useful way of thinking about these is that during compilation, the compiler is going to attribute certain behaviors and certain limitations on every alternative type. All right, so these are the only two that I'm aware of, floating point types within the C++ language. These are the only two types, primitive types, that you can use to store numbers that have a decimal point in them. But there are a variety of other types that can store integer values. Yeah, we have things, one of them, this one can be considered an integer value that it stores, even though it does have some special behavior with it. So let's talk about the char data type. The char data type is a data type that basically reserves a single byte of memory and allows, or generally, most compilers that I'm aware of, single byte of memory, and allows you to represent the integer values 1 through 200 or 127. And it's going to be used for character literals. And a character literal is a literal that is enclosed, or a single character that is enclosed by single quotes. Now, this is very, very important. Notice how before, in the previous class, I mentioned that these were string literals. Well, in this case, we have character literal, and a character literal only allows us to store a single character, and we know it's a character literal because we're using single quotes. So you can place any ASCII character inside of a character literal and store that data. Now, although this is a character literal, it still is technically a numeric value. The ASCII character codes are basically just numbers that correspond to particular characters. So yeah, those are characters. They're kind of neat. All right, so yes, in C++ at least, you can do this. You can assign a character literal to a specific number. Ty, are you referring to extended ASCII? Are you referring to UTF-8 or UTF? Sorry, because UTF starts to get a little bit more complicated in C++ than I'm really wanting to go over just yet. So for the most part, we're going to just be worrying about single byte characters, which of course, single byte characters cannot physically represent however many characters there exist in the world. But we're going over code that can handle that sort of things a little bit more complex. Okay, so again, C++ is very liberal about the data you can stuff in types. So by stuffing a 49 in this character, you'll see that this character's integer value is now 49. But if I were to go and print it, you'll notice something interesting. If I print a character, we get 1. Why do we get 1? Can anybody guess why we get 1? Except for, of course,
I can guess.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you were the one who asked that question.
Yeah, that's why I picked 49.
NATO, 49 is the Unicode character for 1. Actually, ASCII or Unicode is, for the vast majority of it, backwards compatible with ASCII. But we can express certain Unicode characters in this style of C++ because the character data type doesn't support the amount of data that we would need in order to store code points beyond 127. Okay, so people are pretty much getting it right. 49 is the character code for the number 1 in ASCII and Unicode. But what we have here is something very interesting, and don't underestimate how important what's happening on line 12 is. What's happening here is that although a character is physically on the CPU, in memory, it is physically a single byte of data that can store a single number. What happens on line 12 is because of the characteristics of the way C++ was built, cout actually is made aware of not only the value of a character, but also its type, meaning that it can now treat a character differently than if you were to pass in an integer with the value of 49. So these types are very important. Remember, they allow you to kind of express different semantics for the same amount of storage that you might allocate for a particular use. So it's very important to be able to notice that right here, the behavior of CF is being changed not only by the value of a character, but also its type. Okay, so far we've been working with assigned integers. And assigned integer is, actually I'm going to go ahead and nuke all this for now. Assigned integer is an integer that can represent positive and negative values. So although it's 4 bytes, one of the bits in assigned integer, one of the individual ones or zeros inside integer is being used to determine if this is a positive or negative number. So the benefit is we can say a number equals negative 1,000 and print that out. And we could also say a number equals positive 1,000 and print that out. And as a result, we will get negative 1,000 followed by 1,000. So that's definitely cool. So what's going on here is that when we set a number to negative 1,000, one bit inside of this memory was being flipped to indicate that it's a negative number. However, that comes at a cost. And the cost is that your integer, your assigned integers, cannot store as much data or as many numbers as an unsigned integer. And an unsigned integer is the opposite of a signed integer. It's an integer that can only store positive values. So you'll notice if I type in unsigned, and I use the type unsigned int, which is an interesting type because although this is a type, it's being represented with 2 keywords here. If I go ahead and hit F5, you'll notice now that when we try to set it to a negative value, we get that. And when we assign it to a positive value, we get the proper value. All right, this is a case of a buffer overrun, though I didn't want to get that much into it. Okay, so remember, assigned integer is going to be the default, which is an integer that can represent positive or negative values. An unsigned integer is going to be an integer that can store only positive values. We do have a few more types that we can make signed and unsigned. We can do, if we wanted to, we can do an unsigned character. An unsigned character can represent the values from 0 to 255, as opposed to negative 127 to 127. We have a few more interesting types that I'm not going to spend too much time going over, but I just want to make people aware of their existence. We do have shorts, unsigned shorts, longs, and unsigned long. Can anybody guess, without putting this through a compiler, can anybody guess? Now, shorts and longs behave much like integers, but they reserve different amounts of memory. Can anybody guess the memory that either one of these types will reserve upon being used in a function? All right, well, let's go ahead and fire up the type of operator and see who is right. We got some 4s and 8s, some 2s and 8s, some 2s and negative 8s. I don't know how you can reserve negative bytes. That'd be impressive. 2 and 16s. Let's go ahead and see what we get. come on. So in this version of Visual C++, we will get 2, 4, and 4. So that is interesting behavior, at least as far as this particular implementation of this version of C++, or Visual C++.
So is long not actually synonymous with int then?
Well, what we could do here is we could actually check out the upper bounds of either one of these different types by simply doing an unsigned interlong and giving it the value of -1. So you'll notice that this particular implementation of C++ has absolutely no difference between ints and longs, which is pretty silly and actually technically not standard compliant to my knowledge.
Do you want to take a look over the questions panel? There's a few questions that have come in.
Is there any use for a signed modifier for int when it's always signed? Not particularly. You just can do that if you wanted to. C#, I miss you. Yes. See, in C#, longs are actually twice as big as integers. Alrighty, so now that we've seen a few of the different types, and the different integer types are going to be very important when you design your programs so that you are able to represent the amount of number, or using different types or knowing about the different types is important for both memory consumption and the validness of your program, because in a lot of situations you need to find a balance between how much memory you take and how much memory you need in order to represent the values that your program supports. Alrighty, so constants. In a lot of cases in programming, we will want to name a value. And naming a value is really straightforward. We can simply do const int my const equals 100. So in this case, what we have here is a named value. This is not a variable that is placed on the stack or on the stack frame. In fact, what we've done is we've instructed the compiler to see or to check for any instance where I type out my const and replace it with the value that we specified it to be. Any type, any primitive type, you can make a constant out of, and you could also make constants out of strings, but we haven't really gone over strings quite yet because they get very complicated. So, for example, a very common case of a constant is going to be pi, which should not be an integer, probably should be a double. I'm not going to bother with the rest of it. However, so when you see the constant keyword, know that we are simply naming a value, giving a value a name, and the C# compiler will, or C++ compiler, excuse me, will statically replace every instance of seeing this name with this particular value. So if I was to see out pi, we would get that value. However, if I was to do pi equals 10, we would get an error, because pi equals 10 is equivalent to if I had just done 3.14 equals 10, which is equally as silly. So you cannot assign to a constant. Do we still need to worry about 2 bits? I think you mean bytes, short versus int with modern hardware. Certainly. In high performance situations, 2 bytes can mean a lot. When you are, I mean, if you are dealing with millions, hundreds of millions of entities, reducing their memory footprint by even a small fraction will significantly increase the amount of entities that you can represent. Okay, so constants are pretty cool. Now, I guess it's time to talk about implicit typing.
Yeah.
Unless anybody has any questions up until this point, I've been kind of just going through this line by line here.
Actually, it hasn't been asked, but I'll ask it for somebody. You've mentioned stack frames a few times. What's a stack frame, Nelson?
Oh, okay. So a stack frame is when your program or when a function is invoked, specifically when main or any user-defined function is invoked. Also, in addition, when things like sin.get are invoked, what happens is the computer pops on what's called a stack frame. And a stack frame, think about it as the memory allocated for a particular function. Now, we haven't gone over sort of creating our own functions quite yet, but the point is that when main is invoked, when main starts, every bit of data that we ask for, simply by saying int my number, what happens is a piece of memory is going to be reserved that can contain all of the data that the int main method or function requires in order to function properly. So when you push a stack frame, what you get is a bunch of memory that's considered to be on the stack that you have asked for statically within the function. Now, there's a non-trivial problem that you'll encounter because of this behavior. And notice how I said the word that this memory is made available to you statically, meaning that there's no way to, on the stack, ask for any more memory than you have already. And that's something we'll be getting into later in this course because it becomes very important. But when I say stack frame, I say the bit of memory that's reserved for int main to execute. And once we talk about functions, we'll be able to even go into more detail about how we can use stack frames for things like recursion or other sorts of fun stuff. Why couldn't we just use define preprocessor instructions for constants? That's a good question, actually. The define preprocessor instruction simply means define this identifier to be equivalent to this thing. Now, there is a very, very, very important difference between define preprocessor instructions and constants. And that important difference is this is not a type-safe construct. In fact, yes, you can do this.
That's probably not a good idea, though. I'm guessing.
What's the output of this program? Yeah. So if you hated anyone, if you really hated them, you could use define constructs to pretty much destroy, just drive them insane. I mean, we can say define main as main. Ooh, now our program doesn't compile anymore because we no longer have a main function. Define int as a float.
I'm going to have to remember that when it comes to the Boolean logic questions in the tests.
I mean, we could even get even more ridiculous than this. We can say define true as sin.get. So this gets ridiculous. And what I'm trying to point out, though, is that these defined constructs they do not care whatsoever about the type safety of what you're doing. They in no way carry any type semantics with them when you use them.
So how does that know how much memory to allocate for?
It doesn't.
My number.
See, what this does, this just text replaces. This will just literally take the word the thing 10 and stuff it right there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. What should define be used for? Defines are used for include guards, which we'll get into when we get into looking at multiple files. Defines are also used for what are called macros, which do have fewer uses in C++ than they did C, but still have some use. You can do some fun stuff with defines. So what is my number now? My number is neither a string or an integer. It's just an instruction to the preprocessor to take every instance of this identifier and replace it with this literal 10. So here's the problem with defines. We don't have any semantic type information. And there's nothing stopping us from saying, well, I'm sick of my number being 10. Let's make my number, what can we do here? Yeah, fish. And we can do that. Can define true false be snuck into header of the program and affected globally, or just that code file? Defines are included wherever they're included. If you stick a define in a header file and include it in a CPP file, then it'll be affected. So, like I said, if you really wanted to make someone miserable, just do that. Or, even a better one, you could always do define if while. That's one of my favorites. Any useful practices for define in such a way? Not like this, but there are useful cases for define, especially with include guards and certain bits of syntax that we can take advantage of, right. Certain repetitious bits of syntax.
We'll get into some of that stuff a little bit later on in this course, but I don't want us to stray too far. So let's go ahead and jump over onto implicit typing.
Okay, so far we have been doing explicit typing. So when I say int my number, we have declared that we have a variable called my number and we've given it the type of integer. But this scenario actually isn't as or as common as you might think. Generally what we do is we say int my number equals, and then we initialize it, usually to 0, maybe to some other value. When we initialize our variables like this, we are providing redundant information. The reason we are doing this, providing redundant information, is because we have declared that these variables are going to be initialized to these values. And these values do have types. This is an integer, this is a float, and this is a double. When we get into talking about OOP pointers and the new operator, it'll be even more apparent. But very, very commonly when we initialize our variables, we know the type that we want to initialize the variable to. So why provide that information twice? So in C++ 11, what happened was they introduced the concept of implicit typing. Now, they did not introduce this concept for these sorts of scenarios. They introduced the concept of implicit typing for scenarios where you might have a type that is 10 characters long. And in C++, you will run into types that are 10 characters long. There are
Sorry, I don't follow what you mean by that.
For example,
you mean their name?
That's a type in C++. And typing this out multiple times gets obnoxious, especially when you don't need to. It gets a lot worse than this. There's also the const iterator. Of course, I don't have the header and file right now, so it's throwing errors. But the point is that the types get so ridiculously long in C++, even more so than other languages, that they have introduced in C++11 the concept of implicit typing. And I didn't mean to scare anyone with that type, but I'm not going to be quizzing people about what that is. We'll get into it soon. Implicit typing is a way to have the compiler determine the type of a variable for you based off the value that you initialize it to. In C++, implicit typing is represented with the word auto. Now, I want to point out that this is a very common misconception about implicit typing, but I want to just take this and just pound it into everybody's brain. Implicit typing is not dynamic typing. Every one of these variables has a static type, and that static type cannot change ever during the execution of the program. Instead, what we've done is we've told the compiler that instead of us providing the type for our variables, we're going to have the compiler infer the types for our variables. And yes, it is exactly like var in C#. And it has similar limitations too. For example, there's no way to implicitly type a variable that does not have an initializer.
Strangely enough, I found myself talking about this just now, earlier today. But basically, if somebody gave you a piece of paper with one of those lines of code written on it, you can work out from context. You know that 0 is an int. So you know that auto is an int. Turns out to be an int there. And that's basically what the compiler does. Yes?
Yeah. If in the initializer, and that's the important bit, if in the initializer it is logically possible to deduce the type, then auto will work. Otherwise, auto will not work. So does it automatically choose the type that will save you the most memory? No. It will automatically choose the type that is whatever type on the initializer is. All of these values have types. 0 is an integer, 0.4f is a float, 10.4 is a double.
Did you see what Soapful put in the questions?
Some people might be using an auto has different meaning. Yeah, this is a C++ 11 feature only.
And then there's
so
you really need to go back over, because there's a few people. There's one question over in the questions panel and a few comments that have scrolled by in BuzzNet that some people may look at this and think, wow, that's kind of useless. Like in the case of int, you're now typing more characters. I know you did mention it, but now that you've gone over it once, you might want to just kind of repeat where it does truly become useful.
That's an interesting point, actually. More muscles need to move in order to type auto than int, but less brain power is involved. So it's a good balance.
And obviously, don't worry about trying to copy this down. Nelson is making a point.
And Mac, no, that's just why he bought that keyboard, because it's really noisy.
I bought this keyboard because it's nice. It's my favorite keyboard. This code right here, or at least right here, this iterator that I'm using here, is a type that is very common in C++. We will be using types like this. In fact, we will be using this exact code quite a bit once we start talking about collections. Now here's the problem. This is a very long type. As a result, typing it out becomes very, 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 very tedious. Instead, we can now do auto-iter equals mymap.begin. The type is inferred based off of what mymap.begin returns. So this code becomes equivalent. FatGav, yes. Or Gavin, yes. Okay, so that is why they invented it. And that is a specific situation where it'll save you typing. That being said, I really honestly prefer implicit typing. See, implicit typing doesn't really have any drawbacks. There is, first of all, at a very fundamental sense, there's no reason for us to specify the type of something if we already specify the type inside of our initializer.
You know what?
And this will become even...
Sorry, go ahead.
This will become even more important as we create our own functions and our own classes that have complex interactions between each other. So, I was
going to say real quick, you know what really is cool about implicit typing in C++? You know for a fact that all of those things have been initialized.
Oh, there is that too. Because in C++, uninitialized variables are a pain and will cause you misery.
Yep.
But I will generally prefer implicit typing over explicit typing in every case.
Explicit typing is a tautology. It's at the end of the day, you're saying it twice in the same line of code.
Yep. If you do need an unsigned integer, you're going to have to, well, not necessarily. Once we get into function return types, that'll be a lot more, auto will make a lot more sense. So far, we've just dealt with literals right now. We have not dealt with function return types. And once we do, this construct will make a lot more sense. But generally speaking, I will prefer implicit typing. I like how it looks, how it lines up. I like how it forces me to create better names for my variables when I write methods or functions. And I like how it saves me typing and saves me worrying about things. I like how it allows me to refactor my code easier because simply by changing the type of a return type, all the variables that are assigned to that function invocation have been changed as well. Does implicit typing cause any overhead? No. Implicit typing does not do anything during runtime.
It is basically just you telling the compiler, hey, look, I know you're intelligent enough to work out that this is this type, so I'm going to delegate to you to, and then when it compiles it up, it ends up with the same thing.
Yep.
And did you get Barry's question over in the questions panel?
Are we using C++ 11? I'm on VS 2010. I'm on VS 2010 as well. We are using C++ 11. VS 2010 supports C++ 11, a lot of the specification, or at least the aspects that we will be using.
Okay, and with that, we're at about an hour and 3 minutes now into the class. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break for those of you that need to get something to drink, bathroom, etc., and then we will resume right afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to be pausing the recording now. Okay, and we are now back from break.
All right, a question came in about the int max and int min macros that are provided in the limits.h header. And there is a header here called limits.h. And what that's going to provide, this is a C header that's going to provide us with some maximum and minimum ranges for any of our given basic data types. So you can use this as a way to determine the compiler's maximum minimum range, which should be standardized between compilers. Okay. So, yeah. I'm going to briefly talk about the fact that C++ supports some basic arithmetic operators. I want to go over these operators right here. We have subtraction, addition, division, multiplication, and modulus. Everybody here should be familiar with these four operators, and these four operators are, at least in this context, binary operators. So what I mean by a binary operator is that they take in two operands. So for example, we can say int left equals 10, int right equals 20, and we can say int result equals left plus right. In this case, I'm using the binary addition operator. And I'm not referring to binary as the numbering system. I'm referring to binary as the literal English definition of the word meaning two. And the reason it's a binary operator is it's going to take in two operands. And an operand is an argument to an operator. So you see that we have two operands, left and right, and they're sandwiched together here by the addition binary operator. And the addition binary operator will work as expected. As in, it will add two things together. So is everybody good with the basics of arithmetic operations in C++? I mean, it doesn't, these four guys right here are not going to require too much explanation, I don't think.
No, I wouldn't think so.
However, the modulus operator is very interesting. The modulus operator will return the remainder of a division operation. So for example, if I were to do right left, okay, given the definition of the fact that the modulus operator returns the remainder of a division operation, anybody who previously did not know what the modulus operator was, can you guess what result contains after line 10? Yes, Segfault, I know you know. The answer is going to be 0. Now, the reason we get 0 is that right divided by left is, well, there's no remainder. Now, what if I changed this to 20 divided by a number that isn't divisible by 20, such as 15? Can anybody guess what the result of this is going to be? And we get 5. So the modulus operator, one of the coolest things we can do with it is determine if a number is even or not. Can anybody guess the expression that we would need in order to determine if, let's say, left, how can we get result to be true if left is even, false if it is odd? Any guesses? And I'm targeting people who are new to programming with this question. Okay, so we did get some left modulus 2. We did get some of these. Now, here's the problem with this. This will return 0 if left is an even number. Now, 0 in C++ is false. Not only that, in the first lesson, I did try as hard as I could to tell people that converting integer values into Booleans is silly and will result in weird behaviors if you are not careful. So there's two problems with this code. First of all, it'll return the opposite result of what we want. Second of all, the data type that this expression returns is an integer, not a Boolean. So in order to both A, get it to return what we want, as in true for even, false for odd, we also want to get the data type of this expression to be a Boolean. And to do this, we could simply do equals 0. Or oh, yeah, I'm stupid. This is what we wanted. For some reason, I thought 15 was an even number. So yes, you can start laughing at me now.
I was wondering what you were doing.
Ha 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 ha.
Okay, but as you see, right now we get the proper result that we want. Because if we put into 16, for example, we'll get 1. And 1 is true. Please unmute so I may properly laugh. Okay, so is everybody good with the modulus operator? It's very useful for determining if something's divisible by something, and it's also very useful, given that, to determine if something is even or odd. Okay, so moving on, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how about looping?
Because that'll be more convenient to have under our belt when we get into arrays. Sounds good to me.
Yep. Buzzcat asks, so equals 0 is inverting it. Yes, it's saying if it does equal 0, return true. If it does not equal 0, return false. So we are, in effect, not only changing the type of this expression to a Boolean, which we want, but we are also inverting the result. Okay. So, and then Buzzcat asks if it's similar to, or if it is equivalent to the not unary. Hold on. A piece of my hair got stuck in my microphone. If it is similar to the not unary expression. And the answer is going to be yes. It is going to be equivalent to this expression. But I still do not prefer that sort of expression in this case, because the not unary expression really only makes sense in the context of a Boolean expression. Now, C++ is very liberal about types. That's something that I don't particularly like. And I don't like converting integer values into Booleans, or using an operator or unary operator that's appropriate for Booleans in the context of an integer type. I find that to be messy. Okay. So, looping. So in programming, we've already kind of talked about if statements, where an if statement is a statement that starts off with the if keyword followed by parentheses. Inside of the parentheses, we have a Boolean expression. If the Boolean expression evaluates into true, we evaluate the block inside of here. Now, conditionals are very, very important for performing logic in any application, but in a lot of situations, what we'll want to do in addition is we'll want to provide some sort of construct for executing the code over and over and over again. Okay, so let's talk about the while loop. The while loop is very syntactically similar to the if statement, but it has a few differences. One of the most important differences is that instead of using the if keyword, we're using the while keyword. Other than that, though, the rest of the block, or the rest of the expression, looks similar, where we start off with the keyword followed by parens, followed by a block. Now, these parens are very important. as long as the expression that is inside of the parens holds true, as long as it evaluates into the Boolean true in C++, this while loop will continue to execute. So for example, what I've just done is I've instructed the C++ compiler to generate an assembly for us, or an executable for us, that will execute lines 9 and 10 repeatedly 10 times. And you see that represented here when we get I starting at 0 and then I ending at 9.
Are you going to go there?
To what Buzzcat just said?
Are you going? Yeah.
No, not right now. Okay, so what we have here is a loop that loops from 0 to 9, so 10 times. And the reason it does so is because of this expression in here. So I'm going to fire up our debugger really quickly and take a look at this program as it executes. So the behavior is pretty straightforward, pretty logical, how we will enter the while loop. And when we enter the while loop, this expression will be tested. We will test the expression I is smaller than 10. Now, if I put this up in my watch, you'll see that I is smaller than 10 is true. As I continuously loop through, though, you'll notice I increases. So you'll notice how as I continuously hit F10, we continuously start over on the expression. We go into the print statement. We go into this operation, which assigns I to I plus 1, so it increments I by 1. And you'll notice that this thing now turns into 8. But now I is 9, and finally I is now 10. And you'll notice something interesting. I became 10 on line 10, the 10th time the loop iterated, and you'll notice that this expression down here is turned into false. Remember, this expression right here is the expression that we're testing inside of our while statement. So you'll notice that when I hit F10 again, execution jumps back to line 7 in order to determine if this expression still holds true. However, you'll notice in our watch, I is no longer smaller than 10. It is false. So what happens after I hit F10? Execution jumps to line 13. And then if I continue the program, you'll see that we have 0 through 9 being printed out.
Nelson, I would, just for our beginners, I would make sure that our beginners type this out. First time actually doing a looping scenario.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and reset everybody's ready. If you are new to programming, please type out this while loop.
K73SK asks, how do you get watch?
I got watch by going over to this little watch window. This window is going to be accessible through the Debug Windows Watch 1 button. Now, remember, this file option and these options under here will only be available to you when you're in debug mode. And just curious again, though, because we haven't gotten too many questions from people about certain things, how many people here are completely new to programming, like in this class specifically? Are people typing in BuzzNet? Because I don't see any responses.
Is that really just one person?
Well, that would explain why the questions were so low.
Note to self, ask this at the beginning of class.
Yeah, that would probably have been better. Although, maybe BuzzNet just crashed. I'm going to refresh. Apparently it's lagging really badly.
Not for me. it's instantaneous, doesn't it?
Remember that when you type in something and hit enter, it doesn't actually do a round trip.
Ah, okay.
What, it doesn't die?
Did you see me type test?
I'm refreshing Buzznet. It's taking forever.
No, when I said it was instantaneous just then,
Nope.
I just typed test.
I didn't see it.
Ah, right.
Oh, we seem to... I wonder if you should pause the video, Jason, really quickly.
Okay, we're back, and let's go ahead and continue.
Okay. Okay, so everybody go ahead and type this out. And I guess hit ready when you have this typed out.
Or we could just have people use the hands over in the webinar just to...
Well, it looks like everybody actually already has typed this out.
Okay.
Or most everybody. Almost everybody.
Well, it's been plenty of time. So, all right, so let's just go ahead and move forward.
Okay, so what's going on here is, again, I already stepped through this in the debugger, just showing you guys how execution continuously looped over these lines 9 and 10 while this expression remained true. So this block of code, just like how if statements work, this block of code, denoted by these curlies, is being owned by this while loop right here. And this while loop defines the exit condition, or rather the opposite of the exit condition. So as this expression remained true, the while loop continued to execute. So I know this actually isn't in the course syllabus, but I'm just going to do this right now. Because, yeah. I equals I plus 1 is a very, 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 very common piece of syntax that you'll be using a lot. And just to make everybody's lives easier, many programming languages support what are called the increment and decrement operators. Now, the increment and decrement operators take this variable and add 1 or subtract 1 from it. Now, there are two forms of these operators. We have the prefix and the postfix. Not going to be going over the difference between the two. So, I++ is equivalent to I equals I plus 1, which we've already talked about the assignment operator in the last class, and this class we talked about the addition operator. So this behavior is the expression on the right, which is I plus 1, will evaluate and turn into, well, 1 plus I, and then it will be assigned to the memory location that is provided to us by the operating system, named I. Okay, so looping is pretty cool, and we can do a lot of fun stuff with looping. A lot of fun stuff. Most programs contain many loops. But I guess one of the most common scenarios for looping is going to be, or one of the things that we can do with looping is take repetitious code and factor it into fewer lines. So for example, instead of the code that I have right here, I could have simply just written out this. And gotten the same result. When you see patterns like this, think about how you can refactor this code or factor this code into a loop. So if you notice between lines 13 and 14, or between lines 13 and 22 here, although the code does the exact same thing, the only difference is that the number changes. Now, in terms of programming, really think about the ways you can turn this into a loop given the scenario you're trying to work with. So in this case, what we did was we identified how many times this thing was going to happen, how many times this same code got executed over and over again. And we've noticed that the only difference is the number of increments every iteration. So we were able to refactor it into a much smaller loop that is incredibly more flexible. Now imagine if you had 10 lines that were repeated over and over and over again. That would become very, very difficult to maintain, because if you wanted to change the output to any particular iteration of the loop or to all the iterations of the loop, then you would have to do so however many times you repeated the code.
Did you want to make some modifications to that and demonstrate how, based off the example you gave a few minutes back using Modulus, how you're able to do even and odd? Now you can print out a whole list of numbers and have it put even or odd after the number itself.
Yep. I could do is even equals I modulus 2 equals 0. And then I can say, instead of printing out the new line right there, I can add an if statement saying if is even, cout is even, otherwise cout is odd. And then at the end of this, I can throw in my new line.
And we had a question come in. Any benefits to using Newline rather than endl?
I find the Newline escape sequence to be clear to read. So that's really all I can say about that right now. I don't really, yeah. I just find this syntax easier to read. And also, you can, of course, insert these Newline characters in the middle of strings.
And that's, I always get them confused. That's a backslash or a forward? That's a backslash.
Yeah. Endl is really just going to be a constant for this anyway. And so, yeah. And remember that the standard library, like cout and all the streams, file streams and all that stuff, they will convert /n to the appropriate escape or character sequence.
And I would like to point out that something that Wolfery said over in BuzzNet is 100% correct, though I don't want us to stray off too far.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah,
like I said, I
didn't want to.
Right, I don't want us to stray off with it being a 101 class.
And even in that situation, if I was doing file I/O, I wouldn't use endl to flush the buffer. I would simply invoke flush if I needed to do so automatically or manually. Sorry, because I think that behavior is silly.
But let's not stray here, because now that's getting a lot of discussion going about that. Let's stay on topic with a 101 class at the moment.
Okay. So in this case, if I were to run this program, you'll notice that we get, not only are we looping over the same code multiple times, but we're making a decision inside of the loop and performing or that results in different output given the counter variable. And the counter variable in this case is I. Okay, are there any questions about the while loop?
And Garfield, yes, we will talk about the difference between pre and postfix. We're going to be doing it a little bit later, though.
Why do I need that auto? I don't know, it just came out. I much prefer implicit typing, and I have the habit of using implicit typing whenever I have the opportunity to.
That ties into what Wolf Knightley just asked in the questions.
So you autoed an if statement? Well, no, really what I did was I just gave this a little bit more readability. I mean, this is really just the code that came out when I wanted to solve this particular problem. It could have just as easily been solved by doing that if I wanted to. Either way. I didn't exactly know how I was going to use this. Actually, honestly, probably what was going to come out was a ternary operator, but then I realized that we haven't really discussed those yet.
Yeah.
Ever been typing something that does not appear immediately, then starts typing everything you already typed in quickly? Yes. That happens in Visual Studio often to me, not on this computer, but on my laptop, and it is very, very irritating.
Yes, I've seen it as well.
Okay, so any more questions about while loops?
Okay, and if you think of one, just we got one. Mohammed just posted something. Actually, we're going to get into more loops next week. Yeah, I'm wanting to keep this one for our beginners locked to one loop type.
What is Auto-Bool? It is going to be, generally, or it should be. It better be. Yes. As you see right here, bool is even is a Boolean. And the reason for that is going to be this equality binary operator right here. If I were to take this out, you'll notice that it is even turns into an integer. That's kind of what I was talking about before, where I really don't like implicit conversions between types as much in C++ and in C, because I find that they more often than not will produce weird, non-obvious behavior. So as a result, I try to keep everything as straightforward as possible, meaning everything I pass into an if statement, everything I pass into a while statement, I want the type of whatever I'm passing in to always be a Boolean. I will very rarely, if ever, provide an expression into either one of these constructs or into any other of the constructs that expect a condition that is not a Boolean.
It hadn't even occurred to me, because you can't. I mean, would that not throw an error then? I suppose not.
Not in C++.
Ooh.
In C++, I can say if 3 equals 3, if 3 plus 3, if I wanted to. I can even say if I probably can do this. Never tried that before. Yep, I can do that too.
Also, Nelson,
I can say.
I was just going to say we had some other questions coming in on the questions panel.
If true plus false divided by 20. Yeah, isn't implicit conversions fun? Anyway. Earlier you started typing include and got some pop-up help. Not there for me. Why? What IDE are you using? Is it 2010 or is it an earlier version? I don't know. I get a pop-up. Does your this is just going to be the IntelliSense feature of the Visual C++ 2010 IDE. Frankly, the behavior of the IntelliSense in Visual C++, especially the versions prior to 2012, the one that's in beta right now, is very bizarre and odd and rarely works properly. The IntelliSense in 2005 and 2008 was absolutely horrid. Absolutely horrid. 2010 they did a little bit better. In 2012 they did even better.
As you see, you got it that time. Let's stay away from C# questions. Let's save those for the C# class.
Okay. Okay, so if everybody's good with this code right here, we can go ahead and start talking about arrays. Now, an array is basically a collection of values. Now, let's say we wanted to store 3 products, specifically 3 product prices. So we have product 1 price. Let's make this a double. Actually, what am I even doing? I think this is an auto. Product 1 price equals 20.0. Product 2, and I guess we're doing 4 prices, not 3. I lied. I do that sometimes. Okay, so let's say we have 4 product prices. In fact, let's say that these aren't even known here at the time that we execute our program. Let's say we wanted the user to be able to insert the price for each one of these 4 products, and then we wanted the program to output it back. So let's go ahead and write that code. This is so painful to write. Okay, so now if we run this program, we can now type in a product 1 price, a product 2 price, a product 3 price, and a product 4 price, and we get the prices printed back out to us. Now, this program should pretty much be straightforward for everybody who even went through the first course with us last week. And it is a straightforward program, but it has a variety of problems. And the biggest problem is the fact that it's going to be, well, first of all, it's really long. And second of all, we can't easily add more products. And finally, we can't change the behavior of our printing code or of our input code without changing it in X many places, where X is the amount of products that we support. How did I type in 4 lines at once? That's going to be holding down the Alt key and clicking and dragging. That gives you a nice little block select. I'm getting a warning in Xcode. Auto type specifier is a C++11 extension. Well, it is. I'm not entirely sure what. We can look into that later after class, and maybe the Xcode compiler hasn't been, or the compiler that Xcode uses hasn't been updated to understand that C++11 is now standardized. Okay, so what we have here is a very simple program, not very robust, not very extendable. The logic is straightforward. Now, the first thing you might want to do here is say, well, you know what? I know that I can use an array here, because we're repeating these 2 bits of code, or not an array, a loop, because we're repeating some code so many times. So let's go ahead and start out with using a loop to write this code. So let's start out with our input, and then let's do our output. So our input is going to be, well, I'm going to do this actually below my variable definitions, because this will drive home the point. Our input is going to be int index, or auto index equals 0, while index is smaller than 5, index plus plus, and let's go ahead and see out enter price for product. That's an interesting problem. Let's ignore that and move on to the output. So input hasn't been corrected yet, but we'll see a similar problem right here. What? Come back. Okay, we have an interesting problem. So we're using our loops to sort of take the code that we had to repeat over and over and over again and clean them up. So that's great. But we have a problem here. The problem here is that we have no way to reference these variables. So does everybody sort of understand the problem, or at least the refactoring as I've done it so far with the looping and the problem that we're running into at the moment?
As an aside, did you intend for those to have 5 products?
Oh. No. I see the world in a 0 index based. So I don't know why I typed out product 1. And so then when I saw product 4, I was like, oh, there must be 5.
Oh.
Okay. Now, there is a way we could maybe sometimes get this to work by using some pointer arithmetic, grabbing the address of where this is on the stack frame, doing some addition. But we're not going to be doing that because that would be just ridiculous. But we could if we wanted to. We shouldn't, because that's not guaranteed to work all the time. What we need is a way to access or to create a bag of prices that we can index by a number. And that number is going to be, well, an index into what's called a collection or an array of values. So let's go ahead and type out or represent these 4 prices in array format instead of just naked variables. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, move it down here. And put in an array. So I'm going to say double product prices 4. What I've effectively done here is I've taken all 4 of these values and I've kind of grouped them together under a single name. And I can access those values within that name dynamically by using what's called an index. And the index is going to start at 0 and end at 3, which is exactly how our index here is going to work. We're going to start at 0 and we're going to end at 3. So if I go ahead and comment this code out here, we will get very similar behavior. The difference is not only is this code shorter, but it's significantly more robust. We can now alter our input or output logic and change that behavior for every single item that's printed. So in effect, we've taken these 4 variables and we packaged them up into a single variable. That's really what the power of arrays are.
But what if you've got 5?
Well, in that case, we can just... Okay, so I guess, yeah, now would probably be a good time to go over the syntax of what I've done here. What I've done here is I've created a special variable called an array. And the reason it's an array is because of these square brackets right here. And these square brackets contain a number. They must contain a number in C++, and that number must be a constant value in C++. The reason this number must be a constant value in C++ is that arrays are going to be, when used like this, they're going to be initialized on the stack. And remember, the stack frame for main must be constant between all invocations of this program. So what we've done here, we've specified a type double. Then we specified a name, product prices. So far, so good. Basic variable. But then we've tacked on these square brackets. And when you apply the square brackets at the end of the identifier and put a number in between them, what you've essentially done is created 4, or however many you specify there, things of that type. We have created one variable that actually contains 4 variables inside of it.
And they all have to be the same type?
Yep.
Yes?
somebody asked, product prices num would throw an error. Yes, if I were to say int how many products you want, cin how many products you want, and then say product prices how many products you want, we'll get a nice little error saying that we expected a constant expression. So everything inside of these square brackets must be a constant expression. And the reasoning behind that is actually something that makes sense, because this effectively does this. From a memory standpoint, these two lines are perfectly equivalent. The only difference is we can now dynamically reference. We've logically grouped together 4 variables, and we can dynamically reference each one of those individual variables by an index.
Yorgo has a question which is a narrow point, which is why don't we declare array as the variable type?
There is no such thing as an array type in C++. I mean, there is. You could say this is the array type, but think about it like this. For every type in C++, there is a corresponding array type. This is the array type of double. So you'll notice that when I hover over product prices, it says double product prices square for square. Christian, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, I assume he's got on line 16, he's got indexes less than 6.
This may or may not throw an error. It'll compile, by the way. What I meant by is a runtime error. Please throw an error. Oh.
You just broke Nelson.
Oh. I forgot that you could do that. Yeah. The fact that you can do this is one of the banes of programming with C++. This is why, so I've done four variables. So you notice the length of my product prices is 4. I've put in four values into that array. Now watch what happens when I put in a 5th value. This 324 value, it got placed in memory that was not meant for it. It got placed in the memory that was allocated after the product price is 4. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's actually going to be the return address of this function. Or no, it's probably going to be index. So maybe it placed it. I mean, I don't know what the memory positions are going to be. That's compiler dependent. But the fact is, by typing in 324 and hitting enter on index number 5, we have effectively set memory after this array, which makes me very sad that this code actually not only compiles, but also works in runtime. But you'll notice when the program ends, we get a runtime check failure. Stack around the variable product prices was corrupted. Now this is Microsoft Visual C++ giving us a nice little warning that we have done something called a buffer overrun. A buffer overrun is one of the worst runtime bugs you will ever encounter in any programming language. By sending values past the length of this array, we were able to write to arbitrary pieces of memory. In fact, this is one of the most common attack vectors for programs. Let's say you have a program like Photoshop, and let's say you discover that a piece of Photoshop, when it loads a certain file format, it allows you to overrun a particular buffer. So now what you could do is you could craft a file that overruns this little buffer, the little array that's somewhere in a random piece of Photoshop code. And then you were able to put in values that you decided on earlier, allowing yourself to execute any arbitrary code in Photoshop, which would allow you to execute arbitrary code on a computer. This is one of the most common forms of attacks in programming. which means you must be very, very vigilant that you never do this. To be safe, would you need to restart your computer now? No. Fortunately, Windows will not let me modify memory outside of the process by default. So fortunately, I'm mostly sandboxed in, which means when my program exited, all the memory I just corrupted would be reclaimed by the operating system.
And so the memory isn't necessarily the next, like, for instance, if after that first while loop you then, or no, after the double initialization you initialize something else, would it necessarily be that gets overwritten, or does it just depend as to where there's space in memory that it puts things?
It could. I think that's dependent. That's dependent on the compiler and optimizations. I mean, let's see what happens. So now if I do 5, let's jump into our debugger and, oh, come on, there's no break. Okay. Okay. Nope, stuff didn't get set properly. I don't know the layout of this, the memory, and that's going to be compiler dependent and optimization dependent.
Okay, not to worry. Don't want you to get too distracted.
And also, there are very several questions that have come in on the questions panel, Nelson. So make sure you scroll up to.
Yeah. Okay, so you use square index to reference the whole list or the array. No, I use this right here to reference the specific item inside of the array that's at this corresponding index. For example, what I can do here is I can say cout product 1 product prices at the first index. And I can do this 4 times. So I use the square bracket to indicate which one of the items inside of this array I want to access. And remember, an array is just going to be a collection, a bag of stuff that is similar in type that we can access and pass around as an entire unit. And we pick up an item out of that array by specifying the index that we want to grab from in that array. I guess that was a horrible sentence. What if you don't know ahead of time how many items you have for your array? Very good question. When we get into pointers and, well, actually, when we get into vector, we will find out a way of doing this. The reason is that because the way stack frames work, there's no way to dynamically allocate memory on the stack. Instead, what we have to do is during program execution, we have to ask for additional memory from the operating system to support the data we want to hold. However, the process of asking for that additional memory during runtime is a very involved subject that I would want to talk about in a class in isolation of everything else. So for now, we are just going to be worrying about const-sized arrays. But once we start getting into more dynamic data structures, then things will get very interesting.
And Mohammed, we can discuss, I just want to point this out because several people have brought it up, what a memory leak is. It's just not really applicable where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I can just, because of what I just said in the last statement I made,
you can go ahead.
I can just say that when you ask for memory from the operating system and you don't give it back when you're not using it anymore, that is called a memory leak. Mental, yeah, just like what Segfault said, it has a vector which has the same actual performance characteristics and similar implementations as the C# list. Okay.
And Gavin, just to let you know real quick, it's about an hour and 40 minutes away.
I'm struggling today, sorry. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Are the arrays zero-based? Yes, arrays are zero-based.
All right, so go ahead and scan through the questions panel, Nelson, because there was a few more over there.
If you only had enough memory available for an array of length 4, would the machine just flat out crash? You would get an exception, an out-of-memory exception, and your program would most likely crash. Actually, your program wouldn't even start. And the reason why your program wouldn't start is the operating system would know that there is enough memory to allocate a stack frame for this function. That being said, there are a lot of built-in things inside the operating system that prevent this from happening, especially, for example, the page file, which is a little location on your hard drive that your operating system uses in place of memory when it runs out. Can you use the keyword const on arrays to stop this problem? I'm not sure what you mean by that. The reason why this isn't a memory leak is just because when the main function exits, the stack frame that was allocated for the main function gets disposed of, meaning we don't have to manually manage any of the memory that we ask for during the execution of main. So you'll notice how we have two variables in this main function. We have this integer index, and we have this double product prices of four items long. When main starts, the memory required to hold both this and this are allocated for us.
And
none of this is dynamic memory allocation. And all of this is allocated when main starts.
I was just going to say, for the record, for those of you that are familiar with what memory leaks are, this is why it's not applicable to what we're actually discussing right now. And sometimes, actually often, it's very easy to overload a complete beginner to programming with way too many terms. And that's something that we try to avoid. We try to build these things up where they're most applicable. And when we get into dynamically using memory, then obviously we're going to be discussing memory leaks a lot.
Alrighty.
Did you see David? I actually don't know how to pronounce that. He keeps getting runtime error 3.
Do you have your code that looks like this, where you have an array of 4 items long, but you're looping over the array 6 items? Because if you do this, then you will get a runtime exception. Oh, right, never mind. It's this code that's going to throw the exception. Yeah, I haven't initialized any of these values, so I get an exception when I try to access them. This was just for demonstration purposes. To make this code work properly, you'd simply have to initialize all the different values. Okay, is there a way of determining an array's length in code, like myArray.length? Well, here's the problem with C++. Not a problem. This is just a behavior of a facet of C++, which can be a good thing and sometimes makes things more difficult. And that is, arrays are not objects. Arrays do not have properties. Arrays do not have behavior. Arrays have nothing. They are just bits of memory that we can access, just like variables, or more explicitly, just like primitives. Meaning, if we were to do product prices dot, we would get no functionality, because arrays are not objects. They have no methods on them. Now, determining the length of an array is a very difficult thing to do. You can determine the length of an array when they're allocated statically like this, by using a simple formula. By doing this, we can determine how many items are in the product prices. The reason we can do so is that this array, the length of this array, is something that's static, meaning the sizeof operator knows how many bytes are going to be allocated for this entire array. Because we know how many bytes are going to be allocated for the entire array, we can divide it by the amount of bytes that are going to be allocated per element. And the result is going to be the length of the array. So now instead of saying this, I can do this. But remember, this is all still static. There's no way to change the length of this at runtime. There's no way to initialize it to a variable length, period. We would have to use the new operator in order to do that. But now if I were to change the amount of product prices in a single place, I now can do so very efficiently.
So is that always going to be divided by the size of double?
As long as the array's type is double, yes.
Oh, sorry, I just had another brain fart. I read that int at the beginning of the line and had, yeah, okay, ignore me.
And right now, Nelson, let's go ahead, and we're at 2 hours and 1 minute of recorded, so we've done over an hour since we've been back from break. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And for those of you that have any questions, this is a good time to go ahead and formulate them and post them over in the questions panel in the webinar system. And we'll be back in 10 minutes to continue. So I'm going to go ahead and pause recording. Okay, we're now back from break. And Nelson, if you want to take a look over in the questions panel.
Yeah. Okay, so we have some questions. Muhammad, there is no array.length or array.count in C++. In fact, there is no array type. Well, there is an array type, but it's a compiler time construct. It doesn't have any runtime behavior. It's just a collection of values that are grouped together in memory. So it's nothing really special. Okay, what else do we have? Could you scroll the code window down? Yes. Now this code is just the commented out code that used to do exactly what this code does, but this code does so a lot more efficiently and a lot more robustly. Okay. I don't know the equivalent code for it in C++. There is no equivalent code. There's absolutely no equivalent code to find out the size of a dynamically instantiated array. Now there is code that finds out the size of a statically initialized array, which we have here on line 12, and that's the code here on line 13. What happens if you do array 1 is equivalent to array 2? Well, that produces virtually nothing that is going to be very useful to you. And here's why. If we do, there we go. If we do this, and if we were to do, if product prices 2 or product prices equals product prices 2, what we will get is nothing that's very significant. All this is going to do is compare, is this the same array as each other? So this will actually always be false because these are two different arrays. If I were to have done this, however, this will always be true because these are the same arrays. I don't know what that is. No, go away. Okay, so...
You must have got your phone and plugged it in.
Yeah, I did, and for some reason it yanked. I just wanted to charge it. For some reason, it disconnected it to my virtual machine, so I have to tell it to go to my host. Okay. Dual, yes, it's the new Luma.
Is there a type of operator?
A type of operator? There is a type of operator. Or, no, wait a sec. Well, there could be a type of operator. It's not built into the language, so it isn't an operator, but there are ways to get the type of something at runtime. That's something called runtime type information. And runtime type information is a very it's a very advanced concept that we're not going to be talking about in this course.
Yeah, okay. I was just looking, obviously, at the size of.
Yeah, we will be talking about it later, but not, in other courses. Does C++ have list and dictionary? No, it doesn't. It has vectors and maps, but we'll be covering those a little bit later.
And see if you can give Bernd a hand.
Keep getting message, project out of date. Okay, that's totally cool. What happens when the default behavior of launching a program is that Visual C++ is going to try to run your program and it's going to realize, wait a sec, it's out of date. Do you want to build it? And then you're like, at that point, it's kind of a facepalm moment of, well, yes, I told you to build it. Why don't you? In that case, if you see that project out of date message, just hit yes. You can also hit the checkbox on that project out of date message, or that'll make it go away forever, which is something that I did because I hate it. It's annoying. Okay, so
Going up a little bit further, we also had some other questions.
I
think Elijah had some about posting questions for class instructors during the week.
Yeah, you can do so via PM or the open office hours or post on the forums.
And really, if you have a question about, I've got this bug in my code, or how do I go about doing this in code, it's far better to start a thread in the C++ forum asking, because, well, there's only a few of us. There's only 3 of us here, and I don't know much C++. So you're far more likely to get a swift answer from a far wider range of people if you post a thread there asking.
Yep. As far as websites for C++, definitely check out MSDN. There are a few other sites that I can't remember off the top of my head, but Google is always going to be your friend when doing any sort of programming. Okay. So is that it on questions? Or Muhammad, did I answer your question? I tried answering your question, but I'm not sure if I did. Half of it. Is there any other, what other part am I missing right now? Just because in C++, there is no way to get the size of something other than doing this. That being said, once we get into more advanced types, like the vector type, which is similar to the list type, then there are ways to get the size of a vector. But there are no ways to get the size of a dynamically instantiated array, and the only way to get the size of a statically initialized array is going to be with this code right here, or with templates, which we are not going to be talking about templates, at least in the 101 course.
I was about to say, yes, we are, just not in 101. As many people that are interested in learning C++, I have no plans on stopping the C++ class anytime soon. 101, yep. 102, 103, 200 series.
Can you show how multidimensional arrays work in C++? They're going to work similarly to multidimensional arrays in other languages, where you specify a comma, or you specify. Actually, no, it will be different than other languages, where you will specify a bracket and then specify another bracket. Remember how I said every type has a corresponding array type? Well, array types have corresponding array types. So you can make an array of array if you really wanted to. That being said, I generally discourage the use of multidimensional arrays no matter what language you're working in. Okay. And it seems like compliance will be coming. Okay, so it looks like people are just going to have to wait for the C++ 11 in Xarray.
With arrays in Xcode, you mean?
Arrays or autos? Autos in Xcode.
Autos, that's it. God. Sequence fail.
Couldn't you use multi-arrays for grids? Sure. But you can use more appropriate data structures like, for example, a vector of a vector. Or a special type that you create. Arrays of arrays are useful, but that's more of a design sort of thing. Once we get more tools under our belt for ways that you can express logic, we can go over how you would support those sort of scenarios without reverting back to multidimensional arrays. Multidimensional arrays really do lead to complexity and difficulty of readability. That being said, they are efficient for certain scenarios, but again, without being able to go over the alternatives and when you would use them, I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about them here.
But really, at this point, let's go over homework. And then, Nelson, after homework, we can spend a little bit of extra time with our beginners and just maybe toss out some extra examples just to kind of help make sure their heads kind of wrapped around the concept of what's going on.
Okay. The homework is going to be fairly straightforward. It's going to be a little bit similar to the vending machine that we wrote early in the C# course. And I particularly like this bit of homework because it really does force you to start thinking about a problem in a logical way. And it's simple enough for a person to get through that is new to programming. So the goal of this program is to simply be a vending machine, where the vending machine will first ask the user how much money they have. Then it'll present a list of products to the user. There must be at least 4 products, names and prices. The user will select an item from the product list. And then finally, the program will inform the user what item they purchased and how much money they have left. The program will continue to execute until the user has no money or decides to exit.
And we're assuming a user that knows how to input numbers and things correctly, are we?
Yes, they need to be able to insert it. They need to be able.
What I mean is that we're not. we don't need to worry about error checking input.
No, we're not worrying about that just yet. Okay, how does everybody feel about the homework? Yeah, like Segfall pointed out, they will be pointed out or put into the onto the forums. Vox sucks. Is that sarcasm or are you? Because if like what Jason said, we will be spending some time with people here later in this class after we get the homework out of the way, and we will have an open office hours, which I would probably recommend that you bash your head against the keyboard for a while. You're not going to offend the compiler. That's something that that's something that I made a point to say in the C# course quite a bit, is that if you don't really know how to approach this problem, start by breaking it apart into multiple smaller problems and then solve each smaller problem to the best of your ability. And you can throw code at the compiler. You can throw as much code. In fact, you can sit there and pound the keyboard if you wanted to. There's a small likelihood that a correct program will come out eventually. But my point is that just try to throw code at the program, or try to throw code at Visual Studio. See what happens. See what the errors are. See what the runtime errors are. Look at the behavior. Try to figure out why you're getting behavior for a specific set of instructions.
Segfall just asked a leading question, which I'd like to answer. He said, how can you, he should have said, can you use the switch if it hasn't been covered? rather than how can you, because the whole point of these homeworks is to make you think about what your program is doing. Think about what you need to do to solve the problem. And doing it just with the structures that you've been shown so far is a big part of that, because for instance, using a switch statement, the switch is doing things behind the scenes inside itself. If you're not sure of what it's doing, it might do something that you don't understand. Okay, a switch statement isn't the most advanced example, but when you get to advanced examples, you need to know rock solid that the basics are correct. Yeah. So the short answer is, Nelson, could you actually specify what they're allowed to use in terms of...
Well, you're going to be allowed to use while loops, if statements, sins out.
Do you write it in the list so that, because then when you send it to me, I've got it.
Yeah. Int bool or and by the way, the word primitive is being emphasized. Yeah, you should be able to, well, variables, obviously. I shouldn't really even have to, but I'm going to.
And by the way, the word primitive is being misspelled. Sorry.
Oh, come on. Stupid synergy. P-R-I-M-I-T-I-V-E. There you go. Okay, are there any questions about, and segfault, no. You may not name a class primitive. Okay, so are there any questions about the homework? There's a Gavin question right here, how to turn it in.
Sorry, that really confused me. I thought you meant I'd asked a question. I didn't remember doing so. How to turn it in. Right, I will also put instructions for this in the homework thread here. We would like to use Dropbox. Now, Jason or Nelson, in fact, Nelson, I was talking to you about this before. Do I need specifically people's emails that are associated with their Dropbox in order to do it the way around?
Yes, you'll need their emails that are associated with Dropbox.
Right. In that case, by a date to be determined, which will probably be sometime over the weekend or Monday, I would need a PM sent to me, please, via the site, just containing your email that is associated with a Dropbox account if you have one, and if you don't have one, can you show them this on the show them where to get Dropbox? And
Dropbox is an amazing free service. Let me go ahead and sign out so everybody doesn't.
That's right. And everybody say, I suggested you. Woo, BuzzBJ at 3dbuzz.com. All right.
Or me.
You people are such
what?
box size people.
What?
Zach's pimping. I think he's got like 8,000 million terabytes of Dropbox now.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to get your name in quickly.
Hey, no. Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with a little bit more space.
I couldn't remember which email address I'd used for it. I'd have got in there quick. But anyway, yeah, come to Dropbox. It is free for, I think, 2.5 gigs, something like that. That's more than enough than you'll need for this class. And it is incredibly useful anyway. But if you could go over and show them how, more importantly, to get at the PMs and send a PM to me.
Yeah.
Because then it's on video, and they have no excuse. Wow.
So go ahead and... Actually, I don't know what is going to come up if I click on that. Go ahead and inside your PMs, so I just clicked on my PMs at the top right, go ahead and say send a new message. And inside of here, for the recipient user, FatGav is Gavin's username, but I think we're using the submit.
FatGav. I want it to FatGav. Don't even type that.
Okay, so send it to FatGav.
But make a specific subject line.
Yes,
So,
the subject line will be Dropbox email, all in caps, followed by a colon, or just how about that? That's good. Dropbox email. Does that look good for you, Gavin?
To C++.
Yes.
Make that the subject line of the PM. I'm not nearly as forgiving as Jason. I will just ignore, well, if he spelled email correctly, I will just ignore them if they're not big. Yeah, can you put the L back in, Nelson? That was perfect timing while I was making that point. This just so that, because otherwise they will get confused with other people's. All I need inside there is your email. I really don't want to see anything else inside the message because it will just make it more difficult for me to go through it and get them out. The way around this is going to work, I will set up a folder which I will then share with each of you. Each of you will have your own folder. But in order to submit homework, you will simply make sure that the folder containing your solution, and Nelson, can you show them specifically which level of folder they will need to?
Okay, so what you want to do is you want to go into your Documents, Visual Studio 2010, Projects, and jump into Program 5 in this case. Now, this is your solution, meaning this is the thing that shows up in your Solution Explorer. Your code file, main.cpp, is located under your project folder.
Sorry, yes. I was unclear. I want to be able to just go in there and run it.
Okay. So then send everything in here.
Yeah. Just send the folder that contains everything there. The folder name, where it's Program 5 in this case, the folder that we're actually sat in at the moment, should be C++ Homework 1. Or Homework.
Yep.
Yeah, Homework 1. And simply make sure that that folder is inside your Dropbox folder that I share with you before the deadline. That's all you'll have to do.
Michael, I know it's not required, but we're trying to make this as easy as possible. What about Xcode and Eclipse? In that case, you're going to be stuck with just sending over the CPP file.
I'm glad somebody brought that up because that honestly hadn't occurred to me.
Yeah,
Microsoft.
There's really no alternative in that case.
Yeah. I can talk to you about that off video time. Yeah, no need to zip them. Just put it in the.
But if they want to, I don't see a problem with it.
Well, it just means I've then got to unzip it again,
which should take you a fraction of a second at best.
Yeah. If they. Yeah. So yeah, send me that. All of this, as I say, will be on the homework thread as well, and the date as to when. But there'll be plenty of time because there's obviously the Friday class. We're getting the same instructions.
All right. So back up for people that are unclear. See if you can make one straight run through again, and then you'll be posting it over in the forum as well.
Oh, the homework?
Yes.
Okay, so we want a program that's going to ask the user how much money that they have, and that's going to be stored in a float or a double, any floating point number, because you want to support cents. Next thing it's going to do is present a list of products that the user can select. There must be at least 4 products with names and prices. The product names are up to you. After that, the user will select an item from the product list, or they will indicate that they want to exit. Then the program will inform the user what item they purchased and how much money they have left. Then the program will continue to execute until the user has no money or decides to exit. Or how about until the user doesn't have enough money to purchase anything or decides to exit. So how does everybody feel about that?
All right, then once this is complete, then the next step, I just want to do a quick review over the whole thing. The next step would be for submitting this, Nelson?
You're going to want to go ahead and grab your entire solution folder. And your solution folder should be named Homework 1, Gavin?
Yeah.
So when you create your project, go ahead and type in Homework 1 as the name. Then you'll want to drop this entire project into your Dropbox folder that Gavin is going to share with you once you submit to him what your email address that you want to use is. Well, that's a good point. Should this be Homework 1 or Homework 2? It is Homework 1, but it's for week 2.
You said homework 1. I didn't want to confuse people.
Okay.
It is the first homework. I don't mind.
It could just be called Homework 1. I don't think there'll be any problems with us being able to figure it out. Or if you want to name it 2, that's fine.
Okay, let's make it 2
That's
then.
fine.
Because otherwise it might. Otherwise, down the line we will go right. It's week 4, homework 4, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Homework 2. Make sure it's Homework 2.
Now, if you could, let's go ahead and update.
No.
Let's go ahead and jump back over and
me.
update the file that you had, Nelson, where you were putting all the instructions in it. Go ahead and make sure that you post in there as well that the project name must be. Thank you. And then, Gavin, I'll let you make sure to add in the additional details about what they need to do in regards to Dropbox, because there are people here that have never...
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I was just looking at a couple of questions. Are you guys using Trello this time around? No. You'll know when you've submitted it because you will have put it into your Dropbox folder. Using the Trello just adds an extra level of stuff to do, really. And there was another one. No, I mean like Wolf Nightly Homework 1. No, that's not necessary. Actually, somebody's typed this, but no, that's not necessary. Your folder will actually be your username when I do them. Any more questions specifically about submitting homework, anyone?
Again, I'll make sure that Gavin details it all in the homework post. And again, I want everybody to see this. Nelson, please bring up a browser and head back over to the live classes calendar. Remember, this is a very important place with all of our live classes. So from the top, click, get to it, and then go to today's class, which is C++ 102, or excuse me, 101 2A. So it's class number 2. Or week number 2. From inside here, the moment Gavin enters in the link for homework, a homework link will appear in here. So once he gets it entered, the link will appear. You can simply click it. As a matter of fact, if you could go to one of the previous classes, Nelson, just as a demonstration. There's homework. And then if you want to go and click on that, this will take you to details. And from this first post for you guys, we'll have much more details than you're seeing, you're seeing right here, because this will be, once you're further on in this particular case, week 5's homework, it's assumed that you already know how to submit stuff.
While you're there, you can just show them, if you click on my username there we go.
Private message.
One of the options is private message, and that will pop up with my name already filled in the submission space.
Just to make life a little easier. And please feel free, if you have any questions about the homework, you can throw it in that homework thread. The thread will not be locked. And then Mohammed had a good question, which is there grading for homework and such? It's not grading. It is making sure that it works and making sure that there is no horrible use of any of the syntax or concepts that we've talked about. More so concepts, because obviously if there's syntax problems, it shouldn't even compile. Well, actually, in some cases it could. But
in C++,
those things will be looked for, and if problems are discovered, then you'll be contacted with what the problems are, and you'll have an opportunity to resubmit it. So it is pass or fail, but again, we work with you until you give us homework that is correct.
Yeah, this is all about. It's one of the hardest things to do when you start off programming, and I've been programming for a couple of years, and I still find it. It's just being confronted with an empty project and a problem to solve, and even knowing what level of problem to set yourself, because often things that you think might be quite straightforward turn out to be a lot more complicated, and vice versa. So it's about using what Nelson's shown us to solve a problem that should be solvable, and also it can give us an indication of an extra indication of whether in terms of if the majority of people are coping with the level of it, or whether people need pushing more and so forth. It's not about bragging rights. Oh, I got more than you. I did it in 2 lines of code. Although that's a nice way to approach coding, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Lee asked about narrowing. We've actually already seen with casting touch. But we're going to hit the casting conversions next week in more detail. We just didn't move it around. There's a few changes that are going to be made on the syllabus, just where things are being rearranged a little bit in order to make the classes flow a little bit smoother. As a matter of fact, there's going to be a few changes that are going to be made before Friday's class that will make Friday's class, again, this class here, same content, flow smoother. A few things should have been switched around a little bit. And it went the exact same way with C#, where we've now got C# when we do 101 again. That's going to be a fine-tuned class, which will be quite nice.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Now remember, I will be setting up on registration for open office hours at 6 p.m. this Wednesday night. Everybody is invited to come and join in, ask questions, get examples, get help. We're making ourselves available for you guys. As far as the Friday class being downloadable, yeah, I already put that one up. As far as these classes from this point forward, they're streaming, and you'll simply be able to get to them, once again, from the calendar. Makes things easier.
Yep. Can it be earlier?
This one can't, because it collides with a private session we have with somebody. And then also by making them earlier, then we have people that are in the U.S. at work that it's a balancing act. We have to just kind of fluctuate with that time for open office hours. Farzad, right now, yes, open office hours are only once a week. If we can find available time that we can put it in at other points, we will. So there are a couple of other courses that we're working on right now with at least one of them that I'd like to make available very soon, which is the networking one. And I do apologize, but there's nothing I can really do except for rotate different hours for open office hours. It's very difficult having a class that has students from all over the world. So there's many of you that the 6 p.m. Central Time will be perfect for, and there will be many of you that it will not be perfect for. And Florum's right. Europe loves you more than the U.S. We've actually been accommodating Europe a lot more, for the most part, with the exception of open office hours. And the networking class is, from what Nelson and I have discussed so far, we're looking at doing it as a like a Photon 101 class. So it'll be targeting C# and Unity and non-Unity.
You and non-you. Fantastic.
And I've got about 39, 38 minutes left until the UDK class needs to kick off. And Gavin, there's a question for you that was thrown over into BuzzNet from GG409.
The sent items, save a copy in send items isn't on by default.
No, I don't think it's on by default.
On the 3DBuzz forum, you have to actually have gone in and changed your settings. So unless you did that, you won't have got one. Oh, also, and because this is just a general thing, I don't ever reply to read receipts. So don't be expecting.
And Mohammed,
don't be panicking if you don't get if you're expecting a read receipt. It just is.
This Wednesday night at 6 p.m. our time, Central Time. And I'll get that posted up here very shortly in the calendar system. And that will be a rotating type time. When we don't have a private class on a Wednesday, it allows us to offer it early so that we can catch those of you overseas at a much more humane time. But thank you guys all for joining us today. Again, we'll be holding the same class, restructured just a little bit, and the examples I'm sure will be different as they almost always are. Friday at 7 p.m. For those of you that are overseas, that does work a little bit because, if you don't work on Saturday, you could stay up late. It's not that bad. And maybe you can't. Maybe you had a rough day. I know how that goes from time to time. But we do appreciate you guys bearing with us with BuzzNet. We'll have to take a close look at what happened during this class. This is the most people that we've ever had hammering on it at once, and I really do think it had something to do when we first hit that reset with everybody. That's when things started going wonky quickly. But we'll take a look at that. Outside of that, you guys all have an amazing day. Hopefully I'll see you guys Wednesday, or some of you. And yeah, for those of you that are in the UDK class, I'll see you back with Zach here in less than an hour. So good night, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
See you.
Bye.